Hello, I'm Keith Spera from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. Welcome to Let's Talk. My guest today is a saxophonist who creates adventurous jazz funk with his Grey Boy All-Stars and Tiny Universe projects. Since 2014, he's also had a pretty good side gig playing sax with the Rolling Stones, including at the 2024 New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival. He returns to Jazz Fest in 2025 to perform with Tiny Universe on opening day. He'll also join several fellow Stones sidemen for a show called Exile on Bourbon Street 2, the Bobby Keys Cuts, at the Orpheum Theater on May 2nd. Here to talk about all that and more is Karl Denson. Mr. Denson, welcome to Let's Talk.
Good afternoon, Keith.
So, the 2024 Jazz Fest, you played in front of 40,000 people with the Rolling Stones at the fairgrounds. Then 7 hours later, you played a Tiny Universe gig at Tipitina's that started at 2 a.m. Was there a nap between those two shows?
Most definitely. I'm a big fan of the nap. Waking up around for a 2 o'clock gig, wake up around 12:30.
And then, to play those kind of shows, the 2 a.m. thing, that seems to be a big part of what you do. You often do, especially during Jazz Fest, you do those 2 a.m. gigs. Is there an advantage to starting that late? Is there something in the air that is conducive to music at that time of night?
Well, we kind of were because we couldn't get the regular slots. 25 years ago, we started taking the late night slots, and people like what we did with them, so it's kind of become a thing. But I would much rather play it at 9:30 and finish at midnight. But you do what you do.
That's right. On that day in particular, was it strange to transition between those two very different gigs, or is it kind of all just playing music for you at this point?
Yeah, the Rolling Stones is weirder than playing my gig.
Is weirder, you said?
It is weirder than playing my gig. That's like a whole other world. So, I'm 10 years into that world, but I'm 40 years into my own world. So I'm fine with going back to my life. Going doing Jazz Fest with the Rolling Stones. That's way stranger for the day than playing my late night gig.
Well, it was a great show, regardless. Let's go all the way back in your history. You grew up in California. Rolling Stones music, that wasn't necessarily part of your early musical diet. You were more like a Santana, Buddy Miles kind of guy. Is that right?
Yeah, I listened to the Rolling Stones in passing. Like kind of what you would hear on the radio back in the 60s and 70s. But the cool thing was when I was about 19, 20, when I started playing like clubs and playing cover bands in clubs, there would always be these drunks that would walk up to me and go, "Hey, play some Bobby Keys, man." And I had no idea who Bobby Keys was. So after about 3 or 4 of those, I decided I'm going to find out who Bobby Keys is. And that's when I realized he was the guy with the Rolling Stones. And as a result, I started studying him way back then.
Oh.
So I became a fan of Bobby Keys in my early 20s.
Well, that came in handy later on, obviously.
It really did. I really felt like it was meant to be.
Well, and you started off as a cello player, right? Even before you played sax and flute?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I was a cello player.
You had a cello in front of you.
Yes, exactly. I wanted to play sax in 4th grade, and somehow I got talked into cello. And I love cello now. I wish I'd kept it up, but it wasn't very cool in 4th grade. And carrying it home was just a pain in the ass. You remember those old straps where the cello would flop around the whole time? It was just not, so my teacher, Mr. Diddy, he would when it was time for my band class, he would go, okay, Karl, go brush the cobwebs off that thing, because it would just sit there. But I actually, I made all city band. But mainly by watching what everybody else was doing. I must have had a decent ear.
And was it your older brother that you got a sax from? Is that what started you on the saxophone path?
Yeah. My two older brothers, one played flute and one played sax, and we were big, in our house we were listening to a lot of Eddie Harris and Yusuf Lateef and Rahsaan Roland Kirk. Mm. So the multi-instrumentalist thing was kind of in the air.
Well, yeah, and the fact that you grew up around that kind of adventurous music, kind of explains a little bit how you came to play it yourself. If Rahsaan Roland Kirk was your background, you kind of got to be an adventurous player.
Exactly. Very important.
But I love the fact that along the way, at some point, you played in a Mexican wedding band called, was it Donata? Was that the name of the band?
Donata. Yeah. Seppi and Rick and Monday. Yeah, it was a great, that was really, really fun, man. We played through high school. I made a lot more money in high school than I did in college. Because I was doing, by college, I decided to be an artist. I wanted to play jazz. I wanted to play avant-garde jazz. And but in high school, I was just doing these Mexican wedding bands. There was Donata, there was Soul Incorporated, and there's a couple more. But I played around with those guys, and we'd play in Orange County. Where I lived in Santa Ana, it was probably 40% Hispanic when I was growing up, and then we'd go to LA, East LA. We had some dodgy situations where inevitably somebody'd get drunk and then they start a fight, and we'd have to sneak, put our equipment together real quick and sneak out the back door from these weddings. Sometimes it was really funny.
But those are the kind of gigs that, build character as a musician. If you can deal with that kind of situation, you can deal with anything that's thrown at you, I'd imagine.
Yes, exactly.
If you're just tuning in, my guest today is saxophonist Karl Denson. So you talked about making the shift in college to be an artist and to play avant jazz more. Was there a watershed moment for you where you just said, no, this is the music that is the most rewarding thing for me to play? What was it that made you make that turn?
You mean to playing jazz or to playing?
Yeah, to playing more, just to focusing on jazz as opposed to playing in cover bands and doing pop tunes or whatever.
Well, I was growing up, I listened to a lot of because of my older brother. We had a lot of jazz in the house. From the time I was about 12. He's 4.5 years older than me, so. At about 15 or 16, he got into jazz. So I started hearing that stuff, and I was hearing. So when I started playing saxophone, I would ask people, "Who's the best sax player?" And they would always say John Coltrane. And my brother had some John Coltrane at the house, but then I would go and kind of search through other people's record collections, and I'd find some Coltrane records, and I'd ask them about it, and they go, "Oh, you can have that." Well, the reason they were giving it to me because it was the late Coltrane, the crazy stuff. But I would go home and listen to it, and I remember many weekends my brother had the garage turned into his little bachelor pad, and he had a nice stereo out there. So he'd be gone, I'd be in his room listening to these John Coltrane records, Interstellar Space and Coltrane and Pharoah Sanders live in Seattle, and I would be saying to myself, do you really like this? But it made sense kinesthetically with the saxophone, to be making a lot of noise. So, between that and then I discovered Anthony Braxton, Art Ensemble of Chicago, Cecil Taylor. That was kind of the stuff I was interested in, and that lasted until just after college. And I was at a Cecil Taylor concert And after about 45 minutes of him banging on the piano, I thought, this is a lot more fun to play than to listen to. so that was it. I started working on tonal music from that point on.
You came back from the cold.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so with your quintet under your name and then with the Great Boy All-Stars, I mean, yeah, you did, like you said, you played more tonal music, still adventurous, but had a little more structure to it, and it was stuff that people could kind of dance to if they wanted to, I guess.
Kind of what?
Kind of dance to a little bit, even, maybe. It had like a groove, it had a...
Well, that was my biggest... my biggest conclusion when I did go back to playing tonal music and writing jazz is I wanted, the thing about the avant-garde jazz thing, it's all dudes. There's no girls there. So I was like, now at my epiphany came, and I said, you know what? I want girls to come to my shows, and if the guy brings his girlfriend, I want her to want to come back, So I was writing music, and I really, honestly believed always that jazz, is dance music. The roots of jazz are dance music. So I was kind of trying to get back to that, and that's kind of where I've always hung my hat on the fact that what I do should be danceable.
Mm-hmm. If you're just tuning in, my guest today is saxophonist Karl Denson. So fast forward a little bit. You're touring with the Great Boy All-Stars, and you guys really found an audience with the jam band crowd. I mean, Phish fans, Grateful Dead fans. That circuit seemed like it was very supportive, and still is very supportive, of the Great Boy All-Stars.
Right.
What was it?
Yeah, we were kind of we were enough of everything at the same time to make a lot of inroads early on. There was the acid jazz movement, which we took advantage of. But I think the fact that we really, had some talented writers, Robert Walter being one of them, and then me and Mike Andrews, Chris Stillwell, Zach Nager at the time, everybody was kind of a natural leader. So we really kind of forged a nice spot for ourselves pretty quickly. And we have a bona fide guitar god. Mike Andrews is the weirdest guitar god you'll ever listen to, but he really is, enthralling to watch. And I think, from a rock audience standpoint, you got me up there, you're doing my thing, and then you've got the guitar god. And it's like we did some shows last weekend, and we had so much fun, and it was just really fun watching him work and watching people respond to his way of playing jazz, which is not from a jazz background at all. It's from a rock background. But just watching people react to him, that's really a big part of what makes the All-Stars cool.
When you started Karl Denson's Tiny Universe, what was your mindset going into that project? Like, how did you want to differentiate that project from the Great Boy All-Stars? What was different about your initial approach to Tiny Universe?
I think the main thing was I wanted to sing more. Mm-hmm. I wanted to write more vocal tunes, and so that kind of became the focus of that. And as time went on, it kind of was just about crossing all the boundaries, like kind of an all-encompassing take on black music in a way, like I'm going to grab the roots of all this and that and this and that. And so there were times where with the new members of the band, it would be probably a year before they'd get comfortable playing all the different styles of music, where the All-Stars are really kind of a pure thing. It's really, the West Coast Boogaloo is really a thing.
Right, and that's what they do well. Talk about singing. You took singing lessons when you joined Lenny Kravitz's band. I think you played on his first 2 records. You toured with him in all those years. And the story goes that early on, his touring budget didn't allow him to have both a saxophonist and a backing vocalist, so you took some singing lessons so you could be both?
Yeah, Lenny was trying to get the record company to buy him some singers, and they said, well, you can't afford it. If either your band sings or you got to get a different band. Guys that play and sing. You can't afford both. So he got us a vocal coach, and we started working on it. I've been doing those little exercises ever since.
And I bet, unlike your jazz gigs in college, you did have women coming to the Lenny Kravitz shows.
Yes, quite a few. Yeah. In fact, he sat in with me one night at Tipitina's. He was in town, and he decided to come down and play. And I didn't tell anybody. And so, we go on stage at 2 a.m. and Lenny's up there, and we play the set, and then we go on break. Mm-hmm. When we came back from break, there were no dudes in the front. The women had completely moved all the guys out of the front. It was hilarious.
That's great. That's great. Oh, man. Well, let's talk about your relationship with New Orleans for a second. You have played with every New Orleans musician under the sun, it seems like. Ivan Neville and Stanton Moore and Anders Osborne. And you've been coming down here and playing these late night gigs for so long. Is there one specific thing that you identify with as far as the New Orleans music scene goes? Or is it just, you have relationships with all these individual musicians that you've worked with down here?
I'm not very purposeful in reaching out generally. I kind of just, like most of these people I just met like somewhere else, and then it became, we hit it off and decided to do some work together. Or I happened to be lucky enough to have, Bob Dylan. We're doing 5 nights with him at the Beacon in New York, and he invited me to come play a couple songs each night after the first couple of nights. I've just kind of keep my head down and try to learn how to play saxophone is what I'm really doing, and all the other stuff has kind of come by just by chance and by luck.
Well, so yeah, but you've really found, I think, an eager audience down here, both amongst the musical community and among fans. You've been coming down here playing those late night shows during Jazz Fest for a bunch of years now, it seems like.
Yeah, the Jazz Fest audience is the best. I've gone to Mardi Gras a couple of times, and I like not really my style. Whereas Jazz Fest, just the whole city, the people, the fact that they're there for art, it makes the whole scene just so vibrant. And like this year, I'm going to be there the whole time. I'm really looking forward to just setting up camp and going out to see my friends play, do a couple of little sit-ins with people, and just absorb the vibe of the whole 2 weeks. So
you'll be all over New Orleans during Jazz Fest?
Yes.
Excellent. If you're just tuning in, my guest today is saxophonist Karl Denson. We talked about your time with Lenny Kravitz. Was he the guy that tipped you off that the Rolling Stones were looking for a new saxophonist?
Yes. He and Mick are pretty good friends, and they were having dinner when Bobby was sick. And so Lenny heard about it and immediately called me.
Bobby Keys, the Stones' longtime saxophone player. The
exactly.
Guy, the guy who you referred to early on. So did you actually have to audition then? Was there like an audition where you walked in a room and the Stones were there and you played with them?
No, not like that. I sent them, Lenny sent them a couple of tracks, like, his recommendations from his catalog. And then I sent them a few things. I sent them a live version of me playing and singing "Can't You Hear Me Knocking,"
Stone song. Yep.
Because we had done with Anders Osborne a few years before. We had done the Sticky Fingers album. Like, we'd done a bunch of shows with that. So I had some of that, and then I sent a track from me with Warren Haynes, a live thing with me and Warren Haynes, and then a couple other things. And Mick took them, and he and the band listened to them, and then he hit me back and said they liked it and gave me the job.
That's awesome. Warren Haynes, of course, being the great guitar player from Allman Brothers Band and his own many projects. So, was it a comfortable fit when you first started playing with those guys? I mean, was it just kind of like joining a band as opposed to, oh my gosh, this is the world's biggest rock and roll band?
You know what? It was very easy in terms of the hang, and the music's not overly challenging. It really is about the hang, and it's just one of those situations. I was totally prepared for it musically on every level, but the hang is like, it's next level. So that was the crazy part. It's just, getting there and trying to keep your cool while you're watching, the world's biggest band go through their routine, get on jets and things like that. It's surreal all the time.
Yeah, it's definitely stepping up to the highest level in the.
Yeah, and just standing in a room with those guys. Like that's the weirdest part. You're just standing there. You're like, what the hell am I doing here? That's Mick Jagger over there. That's Keith Richards. It's insane.
Well, yeah, you're not just standing there with them. You're playing with them. I mean, you're playing the sax solo on Miss You and on Brown Sugar and all this other stuff. So I mean, that's you're part of it.
It's like the audience doesn't even count. Like people are like, what's it like playing in front of 60,000 people? And I'm like, it's not 60,000 people. It's the freaking Rolling Stones listening to you. That's the big deal.
Well, and I'm just thinking back to the show with the Stones last year at Jazz Fest, specifically on Miss You, on that track. That was an example. It's of how they let their band, it seems like, stretch out. Like I remember bass player Daryl Jones took a big solo on that song, and then you and Tim Reese, the other sax player in the band, you guys did a good bit of soloing in there as well. So they do give you guys some room to actually play.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, they like playing. They really enjoy playing music. Like they're not just a business. They really are great musicians. And it always blows my mind, just hearing Mick after rehearsal. A lot of times he'll stick around with Steve, the drummer, or with Charlie when Charlie was alive, and just play guitar for half an hour or practice harmonica. They really are just guys that like to play music.
Yeah, they're rock stars, but they're musicians. Right,
exactly.
Talking about Charlie Watts, the late Rolling Stones drummer, he was the jazz guy in that band. So would he sometimes show up to your late night jazz sets? Would he come and see you do your thing with your band sometimes?
You know what? I didn't do really any jazz sets with him around, but Tim often did shows, and Charlie would show up. So I got to play with Charlie, play some swing with him once. Mm-hmm. In Mexico City. It was awesome.
Oh yeah, no, that sounds great. No, he was a great jazz player. And look, obviously that band has gone through many, many changes over the years. Charlie being one of the latest, and Bobby was with the band forever. The fact that you guys can all these other players can come in and sort of seamlessly keep the thing going on, I think is testament to that organization and to the strength of the music.
Well, that's a hell of a catalog, man.
Yes.
I mean, I tell Keith, I asked Keith that early on. I was like, man, what's it like having this catalog? I go, because we only really, because of what songs are hits and minor hits and whatever, we only scratch the surface of that catalog. But during rehearsal, they'll rehearse for a month before we go out. Mm-hmm. That's when you get to hear the catalog, because they'll come in and they'll just pick random tunes, and so they might play, 3/5 of the catalog, during that month by just picking random tunes. Like one time they played a song, called "Through and Through" by Keith. You know that song?
I don't think I even know that one. No.
And so the first day they played it, it just came in because we usually will after mix kind of done, then we'll do Keith's stuff at the end of the day. And so they start playing this tune, and it's got this beautiful chord at the beginning of it, and I'm like, oh, that's nice. And then it goes to this big thing at the end, just choom, 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 choom. And it's just a beautiful piece of music. And so they listened to it the first day, and they kind of, Keith kind of picked at his guitar a little bit, but they didn't really rehearse it. Second day, they play it again, and then they kind of half rehearse it, but they're not really getting it, By the third day, they play the tune, and then they play it twice. The second time, they've got it, and I'm sitting there just watching, and I am so moved that I just go like this.
Just clapping.
And Ronnie comes walking over like he's got a little confused, and I go, if you guys play that song, it's so good it'll scare the audience. And he goes, oh, I thought you were taking a piss.
You thought you were making fun of him. That's great.
Yeah, but it's just like that. You get to hear those songs where you're like, God, you guys, how do you guys listen to Chuck Berry all day and write this stuff? Like, it's so weird. It's because you listen to what they're always listening to. It's always just some real traditional bluesy stuff, but then they write these gorgeous songs that are completely out of the box.
I mean, look, that's why they're the Stones. All right, last 30 seconds. You're going to be playing a lot of Stone stuff with Bernard Fowler, who's their longtime backing vocalist, and Ivan Neville, who's played with Keith Richards and his band, and also with Chuck Leavell, the longtime keyboard player for the Stones, at the Orpheum Theater May 2nd. So you'll get to stretch out on some Stone stuff as well. Right,
and we're going to do we're calling it the Bobby Cuts, because me and Tim always remark on how lucky we are that Bobby snuck in there, and got some saxophone on these tracks. So, and then there's a bunch of them that you don't hear. Like I think Bobby's solo on Casino Boogie is one of the greatest pieces of saxophone ever done. It's on a Wayne Shorter level, of the simplicity, like a few notes that really mean something. So we're gonna pull out all the Bobby Keys tracks, and I'm gonna play saxophone all night, and Bernard's gonna sing, Jackie Green's gonna do some singing. Chuck's going to do some singing, and we're going to have a party.
Well, all right. Well, I look forward to hearing you at the fairgrounds and all points in between. So thank you, Karl Denson, for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Keith.
All right. Once again, I am Keith Spera from the Times-Picayune and NOLA.com. I will see you next time on Let's Talk.